were a bunch of parts in the movie where I was like, really, who made the decision that this was something that we should film and show to a wider audience? Because I don't think that was a great idea. We are back with 31 Days of Halloween. It is actually getting kind of cold out now. I gotta have my sweatshirt on because we're finally getting into this fall weather that I've been waiting for. Sweatshirt weather is the best weather. I don't know how many of you agree with that, but that's the way I feel. So today we're going to be talking about The Last House on the Left. The original one, not so much the remake that happened, although I will be touching on that a little bit. Because I feel like you can't necessarily talk about an original without talking about the remake. So, The Last House on the Left came out in 1972, which was the same year that Deliverance came out. And I say that because I'm going to be talking about those two movies together. And I say Deliverance because I think it's important to talk about those movies together, especially since Last House on the Left has a remake and Deliverance doesn't. So, Last House on the Left, the original one, if you haven't seen that one or if you haven't seen or heard about the remake, is about these two girls, Mary and Phyllis, and they are basically coming of age. There's the whole hippie thing going on, and they go out to go to a party, but then they get mixed up with these four people, two of whom were in prison for murdering and child molestation, and the one guy's son, and then this other woman, Sadie, who's basically crazy. I think you'd have to be running around with a crew like this and rescuing them from prison. And what follows is basically the torture and humiliation and basically just dehumanization of Mary and Phyllis. And what usually happens in these types of rape revenge type stories, after you have the torture and the rape and all that stuff, you get the revenge, which is basically what happens in the new one as well. There's a couple of differences in what happens. You know, you still have the whole coming of age story where the child is kind of trying to break away, or I say child, but she's a teenager. The teenager is kind of breaking out of the expected norms of the parents, and then still gets into trouble with these other people. So it kind of plays on the fears of both generations, where these women are putting themselves in this situation where they're looking for drugs, or they're dressing inappropriately according to the parents, and then that is, according to this movie, why they're getting into trouble. So it goes along with your slasher movies of kind of like the 80s, where the only one who didn't die, or the final girl who lived, was the one who didn't engage in drugs, alcohol, sex, or other kinds of bad behaviors. So it's these movies sometimes act as like warnings for kids and teenagers, like, oh, don't do these things because then bad stuff will happen to you. Or if you behave a certain way, you're going to be in trouble. And I don't think that's a great message to give to people, especially children and teenagers, because bad things can happen to anybody. Like, there is no formula to follow to keep yourself safe. Like, Mary and Phyllis could have gone to the concert and then on their way back still been snatched by these criminals, because that's what happens in real life. People are usually minding their own business when bad things happen to them. So these scare tactics of like horror movies or the tropes or whatever, they're kind of frustrating, because I think in the past they were used as like legitimate scare tactics, and now today they're just kind of used as like tropes in these movies. Like, oh, we know that this is how this usually functions. We don't believe that. I don't think most people today believe that kind of nonsense either, but they still use them. There isn't necessarily much substance to The Last House on the Left, whether it's the first one or the remake. It's all just, your first half is where the girls are degraded, and then the second half is the revenge. The movie moves along basically the way any kind of movie like that would move. If you've ever seen I Spit on Your Grave, any of the iterations of that. There's a couple other ones that are escaping my mind like right now. Or even Deliverance, like the first half you have your degradation, and then the second half you have your revenge, sort of. So even though the movie's 2 hours, and this one feels like 2 hours, the remake doesn't necessarily feel like 2 hours. And I don't know if it's just because it's more current, so the characters, you're able to identify with them a little more. Like, these characters, they all have the poofy hair and the weird clothes, and they talk with the 70s lingo. So it's kind of harder to get into, like, being with those characters. And the reason why I wanted to kind of talk about this movie in the same vein as Deliverance is because Deliverance is said to be, like, one of the most horrifying horror movies of the 70s, and it's terrible, and nobody's ever remade it. And I was thinking about that, like, why has nobody ever remade Deliverance? Because The Last House on the Left has a remake, both of which are equally horrible, or not horrible, but horrifying to watch. And The Last House on the Left is a lot more graphic and disturbing than Deliverance is. So it's just a question of. So my question is why? Like, why no remake? Why is Deliverance considered to be so horrifying and so disturbing, but Last House on the Left is not, like, up to that level? So, So is it because the violence on Deliverance, especially the rape in Deliverance, is all against men, and men can't bear to, like, remake this stuff, or they think that remaking it for an audience today would not be as popular because men can't handle that sort of thing? Most of your rape revenge movies are against women, and the violence when a woman is involved tends to be a lot more extreme. There's a lot more of it, and there's a lot more close-ups of it. Like in Deliverance, you don't really get any close-ups, and it's kind of more implied what's happening. Where in The Last House on the Left, it is very clear what's happening, and you get the close-ups, and you get very clearly, that these women are being raped. So I think it's a question that we really need to be asking of ourselves and of the movie community in general. Like, why no remake of Deliverance, but we are intent on remaking these rape revenge movies like Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave, and making multiples of them in the case of I Spit on Your Grave, where women are constantly being degraded, but men are not. And I understand that there are some other rape revenge movies that involve men, and there are other movies where men are victimized, but it's not done in the same way that it's constantly done against women. So if you've never thought about rape revenge films in that way, and you've never just thought about it in general, maybe it's something to think about now and to open your mind up to the possibility, just something new to think about and consider. So I gave The Last House on the Left a 2, and my friend gave it a 3.5, and then, like, the overall score from Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb is, like, in the 50s and 60s. IMDb is, like, a 6 point something. And I gave it a 2 because of the ending, because I didn't like the ending, which I'll talk about in the spoiler section of this, and just the movie felt too long. I know the newer Last House on the Left is about 2 hours, and this one is about 2 hours also, but there's just so much stuff that's unnecessary in it. Like, you spend a good amount of time just watching Phyllis running away through the woods, and watching the two of the prisoners chasing after her in the woods. Why? Like, you could have accomplished so much more by shortening those scenes and making it more tense instead of having 10 minutes of us just watching Phyllis and these people running in the woods. So for me to really talk about why I dislike this movie so much is going to be spoilery, So if you haven't seen this movie or the other Last House on the Left and you want to, don't hang out for here. Cut out now. Like, comment, subscribe, share. And as always, thank you guys for coming by. I hope to see you in the next one. And here we go into why I didn't like the ending. So, in the original Last House on the Left, Mary dies. And I feel like you can't have a proper rape revenge movie if the victim or the survivor, or what you hope is a survivor, is dead. Because now she can't exact any revenge on the people who hurt her. You know, and I had that same problem with the newer Last House on the Left, because the girl there, I don't remember if her name is Mary or not, she floats up to her parents' house, and then her parents are the ones who go and mutilate and kill and basically take care of the prisoners who raped and murdered their daughter and the daughter's friend. I feel like it's not a proper rape revenge movie because, again, you know, it should be the survivor who gets to take out the revenge on these guys. It's not really all that cathartic if someone is basically taking out your revenge for you, especially since the survivor in either case doesn't get to see this revenge being taken out. I'm not sure why that decision was made for both the 70s version and for the more recent version. Maybe the 70s version felt that it would be more impactful for both girls to be dead and for the parents to take out the revenge. And then with the newer one, you know, the parents take out the revenge for their daughter. It doesn't jive with me. I like those movies a lot better when the actual survivors get to, you know, enact their revenge or exact their revenge. It feels better at the end of the day, as much as a movie like this can make you feel better. So if you do want to choose between one of the two, because the stories are essentially the same, I would just recommend seeing the newer one, only because that ending is slightly better and it's more updated and more current for what we have now. You know, the 1970s one is very, very 1970s. It's very clear. Like, there is no question what time period that movie comes from. So, I would recommend seeing the newer one if there was a choice to be made. If you can watch both of them, then watch both of them, and you can compare and contrast too. But I would definitely recommend the newer one. So, thanks for coming by and listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share, or any one of those things. And I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys. One of the really weird things about the older Last House on the Left, that the entire time I was like, what in the world is going on here? Was where the mother takes this guy out into the where the mother takes this guy, one of the prisoners, and she's like kind of leading him on and stuff, making him think that like they're gonna have sex in this, and then she bites off his penis. I don't know if, like, as a mother, I would have been able to even put his penis in my mouth, knowing that, like, he had murdered my child. I don't know, that whole part was just so weird and bizarre, and it just kind of reinforces, like, how weird and bizarre the 70s were, and, like, the filmmaking and the directions they went in. Yeah, that's one thing that completely took me out of the movie, and I was like, oh boy, what kind of directorial decisions were made here that someone thought that this was a good idea?